Hello, East Brunswick. What I wanted to do today and spend this segment talking about is the topic of grant funding. Now, I know there's a lot of you out there that financial data and finances really is just your thing and might find this fascinating. And there's probably larger group of people that talk about financial something like Ambien, puts them right to sleep. But the reality on a practical standpoint is it really matters. And I'm going to tell you why it matters. Because the money that we're able to raise in the township through grant funding really supplements or takes the place of money that would otherwise have been spent and used through property tax dollars. And as an example, and I'm going to give just a broad stroke on some of the different areas and amounts of money that we get on a regular basis here in town. But from a 40,000 foot bird's eye view of things, over the last 4 years, the township alone, not the county, not the school board, separate agencies, but the township itself has been able to bring in just under $20 million in grant funding for all host of projects that go on here in the township. And that, when you translate it and trickle it down to the average taxpayer, comes out to a significant number. So for the average homeowner in East Brunswick, the average tax bill is somewhere between $10,500 and about $11,000 per year. Keeping in mind that 20% of that bill is the money that goes to the township to function and to fund all of the operations for the municipality. So for the average taxpayer in East Brunswick, that amounts to approximately $1,000 over the last 4 years, or $250 more per year in taxes that you would have paid for us to do the projects that needed to be done if it were not raised through grant funding. So this is not an insignificant amount of money. This is rather important, rather large, and almost all of these projects are things that would have had to be done anyway. There are a trickle of small grants that the town gets for things that might not have been done if not for the grant, but the bulk of that almost $20 million are projects that would have had to be done anyway. You would have had to pay for that. So let's talk about some of them. I don't have time, nor would you want me to spend this segment going over every one of them, but let's talk about some of the big ones, the most important ones. And most of this money comes in through state grants. The second largest source of funding comes from federal grants, and the last or the least comes out from private agencies, private corporations that have funding available for different projects. The largest of all of them is a $5 million grant that the town got several years ago. This was a federally funded grant in order to produce a pathway between Crystal Springs and the Community Arts Center. Now, you might say, wow, why is that something that costs $5 million? The reality is that it's a complicated project. There's land acquisition, stormwater management, issues with areas that are considered wetlands. So the engineering and the process is just extraordinarily expensive. And whenever you get federal funding, the requirements are extraordinarily detailed. So it is unfortunately, a very long project. But that's $5 million of the grant funding alone just for that. The one that you probably see on a regular basis and recognize is the incredible amount of money that we've been given for roads. And this comes in various forms. Last year alone, the township was able to get $1.3 million from a freight grant that the state has for any areas that involve freight transportation, trucking. And we used that to repave almost all of Edgeboro Road. We also get money from, and have applied yearly, for money out of the Transportation Trust Fund through the Department of Transportation. Those grants are things that are hard to follow when you go and look at township ordinances, because the way in which funding works is you apply for it in 1 year, the money gets given to you in the next year, and then the township allocates it for a project which won't be done until the next year when the season starts. So for instance, last year 2021 when we did a large portion of Riva Avenue. That was money that was applied for in 2019. It was approved in 2020, and it was expended in 2021. So it's hard to really follow that when you actually look at township ordinances and it comes up to the council. But other roads that, and that amounted, by the way, to somewhere around $500,000. That has also been used to do Dunham's Corner Road. It was used to do Ruse Lane. It was used for Old Stage Road. It was used for Riva. It's going to be used this year for Fern Road. And we've already gotten approval for the following year for Whitehall. So each year we try to stay ahead of that. Ultimately in time, again, these are roads that are our township roads. If we didn't get them paved with grant money, you would have had to pay for those roads because they were really in desperate shape. Many of the grants, like I said, are monies that if we didn't use it for projects through the grants, you would have to pay for it. So let's kind of look at some other areas. Last year, the governor was able to give us a grant for 2022 in the 2022 state budget, $1 million towards the expansion of the Community Arts Center. Again, when the Community Arts Center was built, this was something that was always built with the understanding that when the need arose, it was already built in a way that could be expanded. So that project is just about started in terms of us looking for architects to come up with such plans. Last year in the 2021 budget, the governor approved $700,000 for repairs that were needed at the senior center. That money went to the repair of roofs, it went to some of the windows, went to some of the storm drainage around the building, and it went to an outdoor patio. All projects that would have been something that the township would have to pay out of our general funds. The state also granted us about $400,000 last year to do security upgrades at the municipal building. Many of you may have recalled there was talk for a while that maybe because of the condition of some of our municipal buildings, we may consider moving them. And town was very clear that they didn't want that to happen. And so we never pushed on that. But of course, it now requires that we have to invest in these buildings that are a half a century old. But we were able to fortunately get money in from a lot of these grants to cover some of those costs. So again, they didn't end up costing taxpayers money. Every year we apply for what we call community block grant money. That's a federal grant that has to be used for specific purposes. Each year for the last 4, 5, 6 years, that comes in at somewhere around $125,000. It's been used in the past to help improvements that needed to be done at the museum, the Daisy building, some programs for people with special needs. So the money's targeted for specific uses, but again, money we would have had to spend anyway. We get money to the East Brunswick Police Department. They're regularly looking to try to get money from the federal government or from the state, and in many instances, they've been used for items that maybe we wouldn't have paid for it, but because they were available and we were available for free, we were able to get them. Most of you are aware of the MRAP, which is that large military vehicle that we were able to get through LISO, which is a project or a military hardware that's no longer in use. We have our officers periodically scouring those areas, and we've gotten equipment, camera equipment, body cameras, vehicles, utility equipment, all of that through LISO program because the government was getting rid of it for free. Again, don't know if we would have bought the MRAP for $875,000, but a lot of the other products that we got for the police department are things that we are using regularly. Another example of grants would be through the East Brunswick Public Library, who I mentioned in the State of a Township address a couple of days ago, just got awarded a $323,000 grant from the New Jersey Library Association in order to take some of the programs that they had already provided for our township in the forms of wellness and healthcare related information and providing that to other community libraries throughout the state. So that not only was the fact that this was a big ticket item. In fact, I think it's probably the largest grant the library has ever received. But it also significantly improves the reputation and the reach of our public library within the state. We also got, on another topic entirely, we got $4 million grant from the state of New Jersey to help us with the water line repairs that are going to need to be done along Route 18. As many of you are aware, that road regularly floods during terrible, terrible storms, and the road needs to be repaved and has been on the state's target in order to be done in the next few years. The rate limiter on that one is the state needs to actually get property acquisition from a lot of the landowners along the highway, which is taking the time to get that started has been delayed because of that. But in the process of doing it, we want to take advantage of repairing and improving all of the water lines along Route 18, which is township's responsibility. That project alone is an $8 million project that would have to be paid for out of the water utility. The state has granted us the opportunity to split that with them 50-50. So we will be getting a $4 million grant to do that work. Again, while that might not have been paid for through your property taxes, it would have been paid for through your water rates. Parks and Rec has been able to get money for tree programs and for recycling, and most of it in the way of tonnage grants and grants for those particular types of purposes. Again, these are things that we would have ordinarily paid for through our tax dollars. Those are additional areas of funding come into various different departments, and we try to make residents aware of it because every time a grant comes in, it needs to be accepted through the township council. So a review of council minutes will show that pretty regularly we're getting a lot of this money in. Many of you may be familiar with the township's Drug Alliance. They're constantly looking for money for some of the programs that we provide to the public that help in ways of preventing drug and alcohol abuse. Almost every one of those programs that were put on has been done through grant funding. And while I can go on and on with some of these grants, and again, they're extraordinarily important, keep in mind that's money that's being used to help defray some of the municipal costs. Our public schools on a regular basis go out and try to find as much funding as they can in terms of grants, whether that's special needs programs, some of their building projects, some of their educational programs, arts programs. We also have and are very thankful for the East Brunswick Education Foundation, which is a nonprofit raising money for many of the programs that the schools put on that would otherwise been paid for through the school budget. And the same thing goes for the county. So while we're talking about funding of about $250 per year over the last 4 years in just township expenses, the number is probably even higher when you count in the money that the schools have been able to raise through grants and the money that the county has been able to raise through grants that would have ordinarily been supported through your total tax bill. So I hope that gives you a little bit of a flavor for how important this source of funding is. And many of you may be in positions of employers that have money available that we're not even aware of. So the flip side of this discussion is to put out there to the public that if you are fortunate enough to work for a large corporation or a nonprofit that does have funding available for a lot of the things that you know we do regularly here in the town, whether it's the arts or some of our special needs projects or building initiatives, especially now that we're all looking at sustainability as a mantra. These are, we would certainly be all ears and would love to know about those, because everything that we bring in helps all of us. So again, I hope that's a little bit of a flavor on how important this source of funding is. And Anybody that has connections or abilities to bring any more of that in through the private or public sectors, we're certainly all ears. So thank you, East Brunswick, for listening, and you stay healthy.